Okay,
Hello.
take it away.
Hello. I really appreciate all of you joining us today. My name is Aeleka Schortman. I am an economic anthropologist, food policy, food systems researcher by training, and I'm here to talk to you today about a part of USAID that has gotten essentially, that I have found zero press coverage so far, which is the crucial importance of the agricultural and food sector lending program, or the loan guarantees that USAID provided to small and mid-sized farmers and food processors around the world. And these loan guarantees in many ways, sorry, forgive me, I'm nervous. These loan guarantees in many ways really do fund the U.S. food supply, our supply of the production of industrial crops that we need here in the United States, as well as the entire world's food supply. Um, and my father has extensive experience living in Honduras, and he's also an anthropologist as well. So he's here to help me help us to add a little more depth of understanding to some of the examples that I'm going to be providing about Honduras. I'll let you introduce.
I'm sorry, yes. Thank you all for coming. My name is Edward Shortman. I've taught at Kenyon College for 40 years. My wife, Pat Urban, and I have spent about 50 years or so working in Guatemala, Mexico, but mostly in Honduras. And one of the reasons I'm here is because we began working in Honduras in the 1970s. The last time we were in Honduras working was 2022. And over that extensive period, we've been able to witness, very sadly, the decline in the population and the increasing levels of poverty, increasing levels of malnutrition, which are tied into international development, world trade. And I've had some experience dealing with members of USAID working in Honduras.
So I'm going to give you just a little bit of an explanation about what I'm an economic anthropologist and a cultural anthropologist. So I'm going to get just a little bit of background about what my own research involved. And that basically what I'm trying to do with this talk today is after telling you a little bit about myself and my own research, I'm going to go on to a little introductory segment. And then I hope, and I understand that you're probably not going to be able to read my science in the background, but that's fine. Basically, I'm just going to, after the introduction, proceed to my first little segment. And after each segment of this presentation, I kind of like to get feedback about any questions you might have on that particular topic, anything that wasn't understood, or any way that you think I might be able to present it better to the public. Because my ultimate goal is to not only develop a talk that I can maybe give on the road, but really to create a series of never monetized explainer videos on YouTube that deal with this content. Because I've had no luck having anyone pick it up in the conventional press thus far. Although I obviously still keep trying, and I would love anyone as a reporter to take this story up as their own. And I do apologize because I have not given a professional presentation for over a decade, and I do have a terrible migraine today. So I'm going to do my best, but if I'm unclear, I definitely would like you to ask questions. And yeah, just if you can help me out as much as possible to see if my little segments I've created to explain how important USAID's agricultural lending are, if you can let me know, yeah, do they make sense like this, or if you have any suggestions on how to improve the organization or the presentation. I would love that either right now or via email later. So just as quickly as possible here, sorry. As a cultural anthropologist, we focus on a lot of sort of what might be considered qualitative methods. So sort of loosely structured interviews and participant observation are what you usually associate with cultural anthropology. We prioritize taking the cultural context into consideration. And when we do work with like survey instruments or more quantitative research methods, we do that with a great deal of care and attention to how we're asking our questions, to the cultural context. So for example, in my study, I did an enormous household survey that covered roughly 10% of three different communities, 10% of the households in three different communities. But before I did that, I test ran, all of my questions just to see that they were understood, that they were, being asked in a way that was getting the answers that I was trying to elicit. Was I using the right wording? Were my field assistants using the same wording in the question, were we getting consistent answers and that sort of thing. So really, when you talk about economics, often you get data based on just phone surveys, and there's less attention to tailoring questions. And I mean, obviously that, yeah, can become part of the analysis. But one critique, for example, of how the United States measures unemployment is that, we simply do these phone surveys and we call up and ask a series of questions. But those series of questions have changed over time, and that's kind of buried in these larger economic analyses. So being able to look at something from an anthropological perspective gives you sort of more of a nuanced, more localized understanding, if that makes sense. So my own study involved over 500 people in the household survey, over 70 people who I did in-depth interviews with. I lived in Honduras for over 16 months. I mapped the agricultural cycle as people saw it. There's a lot of conflict over that given climate change and whatnot. I did detailed price surveys and food availability surveys. And in preparation for all this work, I had to read about the sort of economic policies I was interested in understanding in Honduras. So my research was really dedicated to understanding how U.S. foreign policy, specifically free trade agreements, specifically USAID's food aid program, and then specifically the part of USAID that I'm speaking about today, which is the agricultural lending program, how all of those sort of confluence of U.S. policies, the food aid, the agricultural lending, and the free trade, affected what people were eating in Honduras, how people were getting their food, affecting food and farming, food production there in the community, and food availability. So really, it's like looking at one way to characterize economic anthropology is looking at the intersection of politics, policy, culture, and in my case, my specific area of study, food systems and the economy altogether. Does this kind of make sense? And do you have any questions so far? Sorry, forgive me. I'm extremely nervous, but I'm happy
There's
to
nothing to be
clarify.
nervous about this group, I'll tell you that. Nothing whatsoever. What exists of USAID right now?
Sorry, what I missed that part of that question.
What exists presently of USAID?
Okay. It is hard to find out exactly because they've just taken off all the websites. It's my understanding that they have some rudimentary parts of certain aid programs, the sort of charitable aid programs still going. And from what I've been able to find out, basically the agricultural lending program that I'm going to be discussing has to do with it functions in a block grant through block grants, basically. So big sums of money are doled out, and then and I'll explain in detail how this works exactly. But those sums of money have gone out and gone into agricultural lending around the world, and my understanding that those will expire in about 1.5 to 2 years, start to expire because they're operating on different timetables. So as much as I can figure out right now, again, because they have taken down USAID websites and really stop people from finding out a lot of the good work that USAID did do. It's my understanding that those are sort of still persisting. Those block grant programs are still persisting because the money is in the hands of lending institutions around the world. And when those start to expire is when I expect we'll start to see catastrophic results for the U.S. economy, the U.S. food system, and the global food supply, at least in regions. But I think our own allies will be particularly hard hit. All right, so I'm going to, unless you have other questions about my research, I'm just going to go on to the introduction because I think it'll clear some of this up. Any other? No. All right, so USAID or USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. Really, its agro-food sector lending program funds America's supply of food, our supply of industrial crops, and really, in many real ways, the entire world's food supply. Well, at least it did before Trump and Musk destroyed it. So when Elon Musk and Trump killed USAID, obviously, and for good reason, it's gotten a lot of attention that they canceled all these humanitarian aid programs, and these have resulted in catastrophic. Just I'm sure people have been maimed and impoverished, but I mean, at least 750,000 people are known to have died from the withdrawal of these aid programs. So it's understandable that these have gotten the bulk of the press. It's also understandable in the sense that USAID in the public mind, I guess, public eye, is really a charitable aid organization, and this agricultural lending component is sort of the forgotten part of USAID. Or at least I've been dismayed to find that that's the case. So not only did they cut out then the clean water programs, the vaccination programs, the maternal health programs, the nutrition programs, their food aid programs, Musk and Trump really, by cutting out these loans, when these block grants expire, they will have defunded the production and processing of crops that are critical to the US food supply. They're critical to American industry and indeed critical to the whole world's food security. So moving on, sorry. So the US, I mean, it's like, so how important are these imported crops really to us? I mean, we do import on average across the entire year or entire, calendar year, we do import 60 to 70% of our fruits and vegetables. But I'll imagine how much higher that number is in the winter months, right? So you have times of the year when we have predominantly imported produce on our store shelves, for example. Almost all the coffee, tea, and spices used in the United States, including those in spices used for a wide variety of processed foods, are imported. Over 50% of, well over half of industrial products or processes in the United States rely on imported crops. Personal care items, and that sort of, so we're talking like shampoos, soaps, toothpaste, detergents, all sorts of things. Even like the excipients or the inactive ingredients in medications are enormous quantity that all comes from imported crops, and it gets very hard to decipher exactly how much, but certainly you'd be hard pressed to go through the personal care aisles or the cleaning product aisles in any store in the United States and find brands that are really using only ingredients sourced in the United States. And in addition, like, we tend to think, oh, well, we grow most of our livestock feed here, and we do grow most of the grain here, but the supplemental nutrients that are added to that livestock feed are largely imported. And so we'd be looking at, if we withdraw support for all the producers who grow all these crops, I mean, imagine spikes in dairy, egg costs, meat costs, cost of produce, and potentially to the seasonless grocery store if we stop supporting the people who produce our winter produce in particular. And what's more, we tend to think about, oh, well, okay, we have fewer and fewer farmers every year, so we must be heading in this direction of just giant factory farms everywhere. But it's not really the case. It's more complicated than that. Put it this way, that 60 to 80% of the world's food is produced even today by small to mid-sized farms, depending on how you define small to mid-sized farms. I mean, the important point here that these are small, much smaller farming operations than most any farm in the United States would be. So if you have, say, 3 to 15, even 20 or 30 acres and maybe a shack, you are at once both a terrible credit risk for any bank and in desperate need of desperate need of loans if you're going to be able to farm at all. So loans to buy seeds, loans to buy fertilizers, loans to invest in irrigation equipment, loans to have cash on hand to pay people to harvest what you've grown, right? So USAID's agricultural credit program remedied this problem of, relying on some of the world's poorest farmers to produce critical crops by offering these 50% loan guarantees. And that's really been the essence of the agricultural lending program in the USAID, is to offer so we say grants, but that's really a misnomer. They're really 50% loan guarantees that reduce the amount of equity needed by small scale or mid-sized producers, and reduces that by half. And so opens up loans to many more farmers than ever could receive them before. And it also, at the same time, these 50% loan guarantees only ever leave the US taxpayer on the hook for 50% of all these small loans in the tens of thousands or thousands of dollars even. Often these are loans in the thousands of dollars, potentially up to tens of thousands of dollars that support this level of agricultural production. So US taxpayers are only on the hook with the 50% loan guarantee program for 50% of each loan that's not paid back in full. Ultimately, 97, 98% of all these loans are paid back in full. So that leaves the US taxpayer on the hook for 1 to 1.5% of the millions that are doled out in the block grants that are then turned into agricultural loans. And I will get into a bit more detail about how that works exactly, because it's all outsourced to regional lenders. It's not like USAID does any of this lending themselves. So one quick thing before I move on is to say that often we think about all of farming sort of moving in the direction of these large industrial agricultural operations. But the truth is, like for example, in Central America, where we've seen more and more hurricanes, United Fruit, Dole, like Chiquita, Dole, the folks who produce your citrus and your bananas, most famously, in addition to many other things, they wanted to move out of the model of having a big plantation because that was too risky for them. After Hurricane Mitch, they lost, and this is in the late 90s, so they lost almost everything, and they adopted a model of trying to push the risk onto the smaller and the sort of mid-sized and small producers out there, instead of themselves owning the whole plantation that could be lost in a storm, if that makes sense. And USAID was happy to hold their hand along the way, and this agricultural credit program has been part of doing that. So, I mean, one topic I'd like to get to is simply the fact that USAID isn't always the best actor, but pulling the rug out from the funding for our whole agricultural system. Our food system, our industrial system here in the US, and a good portion of the world's food supply is simply not a solution to USAID being not a great actor in all cases, right?
Is it fair to say then that small to medium-sized farmers around the world are producing the food and the materials on which our economy, on which our subsistence depends?
Right.
They are incapable of securing the loans they need to grow the crops that we depend on, unless we guarantee the loans through local banks.
In the current system, yes.
Right. So if those loan guarantees are no longer available, these farmers will no longer be able to produce the food that's essential to us and to them in surviving in the world as it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we think inflation is bad now, when these folks, if these folks can't harvest crops, can't plant crops, I mean, I think anyone who has a small business who's had a farm has know the difference that credit makes. I mean, how it's absolutely indispensable. I mean, so in this case, we're looking at having credit or not being the difference between, being able to plant crops that season or not being able to plant, being able to harvest your crops that season or not being able to harvest your crops, or frankly, making a profit or losing your lands entirely, right? So, so these are critical for our own survival, just getting the money into the hands of the people who really do grow the world's food and our own industrial crops. And I'm going to discuss, moving on later in our presentation, some of the ways in which USAID's agricultural lending program really actually, I mean, we talk about maybe 1 to 1.5% of these block grants not getting paid back, but ultimately, this was a moneymaker. These loans were moneymakers for the United States in the sense that when we gave out loans, those came with conditions, or USAID went around and educated lenders around the world and said, oh, you're receiving these block grants. Well, let me tell you who's a great credit risk. Well, spoiler alert, it's going to be people who are buying from, are getting the seeds from Cargill or some other US agribusiness? Are they buying their fertilizer or their pesticides from Monsanto or some other US agribusiness? Are they relying on John Deere equipment or buying it again from some other US agribusiness? I mean, those people are considered good credit risk in the US, in the eyes of USAID, and they go around and they impart this knowledge or their view of this onto lending institutions that receive the block grants and then issue these small loans these small but yet critical loans to the producers of food crops and also processors of food crops around and industrial crops around the world. So really, we stand to lose not only money coming into our economy that way. There are a few other ways that these programs pump money into our economy less directly, which I'll address later. But we also really do stand to lose our dominant global political economic position on the world stage, because USAID was really designed it came about in the post-war period to make the US a superpower on the global stage, and it today supports our global superpower status as well as just the functioning economy. And so I think really my concern is that losing our global political economic position is really going to be the least of our worries when starvation comes, to our shores here, and to those of our closest allies, especially the poor allies who, like Honduras, for example, or many throughout Central America, have really been quite loyal in being the producers of our own crops, our own food supply here. So I stress, I really do think, in my professional opinion, that widespread regional starvation affecting America and its allies the worst is really the best case scenario that we're looking at here, if we let the block grants expire. So that's sort of my introduction to the topic. Any questions thus far or anything?
I'm wondering, do you have a sense that other countries are starting to look at taking up the slack for the United States and
I
doing
hope
state
so.
loans?
I hope so, but I haven't. One thing I find so alarming is I look every day, or every day that, I do have chronic migraines. Every day that I'm capable of reading, articles online, I check and just see, is anyone talking about this? I mean, I know China's talking about picking up some lending here and there, but I mean, they're not interested in certainly providing the funding for the crops that our consumers are interested in, or U.S. industries need specifically. I mean, because some of these things can get technical, but you're growing like the correct kind of oh goodness, even like manioc, or the correct kind of corn for whatever industry. I mean, having these industrial inputs relies on a consistent supply of crops, with growing these consistent sort of varieties, so they can all be sort of standardized for industrial processes, if that makes sense. So I think even if it is possible that the worst case scenario won't result, but I still think we're going to see a lot of hardship at home, if nothing else. And I've been alarmed to see that. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of active discussion, at least not in the press, about, how is Europe going to pick up on the lending? I mean, I've seen more discussion, and understandably, about the humanitarian aid, because again, that is affecting everyone in the immediate term and is devastating and inexcusable. Obviously, the withdrawal of all those critical programs that USAID supported to get healthcare to people, clean water to people, that sort of thing. But I still, I don't know, I'm just disheartened and frightened, frankly, about the fact that I'm not seeing more discussion of the agricultural lending. I mean, I have seen a little bit of talk about, China wanting to expand some of their own programs, but obviously China wants to serve China's interests and has no interest in, I mean,
Right.
they'll be issuing loans to grow crops that are priced in the Chinese market or amongst their allies, right? So maybe we can, some sort of action on the part of other countries can stop widespread regional starvation abroad, but I don't think that's going to stop us from suffering significant hardship here at home, especially with the other economic damage caused by erratic tariffs and economic policies that have been damaging, including the removal of immigrants in the country who are vital to our own economy. I mean, we're destroying our own economy in so many ways. I'm terrified about what the expiring of these grants is going to do, even if it's just confined to the damage here at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Mike's got a question.
Excellent. Yeah.
Oh, he's still muted. Mike, you're still muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Tell me how to pronounce your name again, please.
Aeleka, that's fine. Aeleka.
Aeleka and Edward.
Aeleka. Yeah.
Okay, I'm still going to mispronounce. I apologize. And I have a name like Aeleka. Okay, so um, I think it's fascinating that you are in anthropology. Number one, I think it's great. And my question to you is, what is there anything we can do about this at this point? And that's the first part of the question. Then the second part is not a question, but a suggestion or a recommendation. Have you considered a guest edit in the Columbus Dispatch on this topic? Or have you already done it? I mean, I might have missed it. You know,
So,
if you could, to get this information out is pretty important. And it isn't in the news cycle right now. I mean, we have so much other fire hose of corruption that goes on
right.
a daily basis that the distraction that takes place. But have you considered that? Maybe writing?
I think that's a great idea. I would love any advice that you could provide. I have tried various options, like just reaching out to reporters directly and giving them my business card and telling them this would be a fantastic story for just anyone to pick up on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would
Yeah.
take any avenue that if you have advice about getting
Yeah.
how to approach a guest edit and how to pitch that, I would be
I
fantastic.
would, Amelia Robbins is the
Yeah.
Amelia Robin.
of the opinion page. Amelia Robinson.
Right.
Do I have, if you hang on a minute, I can give you her email. I could put it in there in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She would be the one and I think easily you could get a guest edit column. You just provide, I think you provide just your background and it's great. Her email, let me go to Robinson here. Hang on, because she's a stellar individual. Her email is they don't have it right here, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat. Very often at the end of her column, she has it. But I would highly recommend that. And then, you could, I think on a regular basis, submit your research and put that out there so this gets back in the news cycle. That to me would be one of the first things that I think you should do. And
That's excellent. I appreciate that. Sorry.
Is there anything we can do, to reverse this?
Well, I think this is the positive note here is I think that if we can at least get the block grants into some sort of to be renewed or that program to be revitalized, I do think we have about a year before we start to see panic in the agricultural lending sector from the withdrawal of these programs, because the grants themselves not only support the loans that were backed by USAID with these credit guarantees, they also enabled lenders to create their own agricultural lending programs. And, smaller cash poor banks are going to withdraw from spending on some of these folks who they consider to be just terrible credit risks. It's going to be one of the first choices they make if they see, when they don't have U.S. block grant funds coming in anymore, then they can't rely on it, that or even any hope of applying for that in the future. As far as what we can do now, this is actually a question I kind of would like to open up to the group. I personally am going to try to make a series of explainer videos that I will never monetize and I'll put on YouTube. And some of you may know I've been going around distributing dictator stickers with my friend's art, and there's a QR code on there. And I have been running the numbers on the sort of views I can generate with visual art. And so I'm hoping to maybe use an approach like that to get attention to my videos. I've gone out and I've networked as far as Milwaukee, Chicago, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and all over Ohio, and have cobbled together maybe, if everyone's good at, makes it on their word, maybe 70,000 people so far who I might be able to reach with the social media who might give me basically a shout out to my never monetized videos on YouTube about this issue. I've also started to network with comics around the Columbus area to help me sort of punch up my videos and make them, more entertaining to the audience. And they also each have their own social media followings, and a lot of them have said they are willing to give me a shout out when they're up too. I would like to be able to, when I do get those videos up, offer people something that they're able to do. And the only thing I've been able to come up with so far, and I'd like to open this up to just general suggestions, what I've been able to come up with so far is maybe a way to contact your representative, your senator, and just send at least a note in. I don't know how I would set something like that up. I could at least provide a form letter and a link to a database to, that, like, find your, representative, find your Congress folks, basically. I know those websites exist, so that's as far as I've been able to think through what I could ask people to do once they find out about this issue. Any other suggestions would be most welcome, because I'm
Laura had her hand up a minute ago. Laura,
Yeah, yeah. I'm formulating thoughts as I'm listening to you speak, and I want to thank you for giving us this information. I think along the lines of what Mike was talking about, what can we do to help? I think educating and understanding how this affects a lot of people don't care until it affects them personally. And I came into this meeting today with a lot of curiosity because I have a cousin who is in South Africa. He's affiliated with Johns Hopkins University. He runs a program called, see if I, it's a Zulu word, Mpilanshe, which means a good life. And he's been there a long time. It's a huge program in South Africa. It's partially funded by Charlize Theron and some other famous people as well. But he relies heavily on USAID. And, and he had started as a treatment for AIDS, HIV, and became an outreach for education because so many of the orphans of AIDS in South Africa had not been properly taught. They live in almost like Victorian times when it comes to discussing sex and prevention of disease. He also addressed tuberculosis, the spread of tuberculosis. And I'm thinking, as I'm listening to you, you're presenting information on a domestic level. I'm thinking in terms of international, but still long term, you've got the spread of disease. I mean, there's far reaching effects for everybody. So as I'm listening to you speak and listening to, Mike's question, I'm thinking it might benefit. I know my cousin was going after alternative methods of funding when the USAID was cut. And since he is affiliated with Johns Hopkins, it might help as you're putting together your information and we're trying to share, educate people as to how this affects us all, to maybe put you in touch with him as well and see if there might. Yeah, I don't have his information right here in front of me, but I was happy to hear you're in Mount Vernon. We just moved to Mansfield area, and I'm trying to find our allies. But I will be I will be in touch with you.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and share my email now. I don't mind. It's my last name at Gmail. So it's a short man, like a short man, but with a C in it. So SCHORTMAN at gmail.com.
And it's Schortman at Gmail. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, SCHORTMAN at Gmail.
And I will put that in the little blurb that we put out for the next week, along with a video as soon as we get it. So people will have
thank you. Yeah.
Again.
I mean, actually, I've been astounded that the agribusiness and U.S. industry isn't up in arms about this. But I think it's well, as you say, there's a morass of terrible things happening. I mean, even if you only care about making a profit in this economy, you're probably pretty worried about a lot of the economic moves that the president's been making, and it seems to me incredibly erratic, if not outright designed to play the market or harm the U.S. economy, one and or both. Or simply are just the product of his insanity and dementia. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just a little surprised that Cargill and John Deere, some of the folks who were benefiting from the Biden era agricultural loan guarantees were definitely John Deere. I mean, certainly any agribusiness in the US is going to benefit from these loans. Any industry, I mean, I guess people don't realize how much they rely, I guess, on imported crops. And I think maybe even like some, I don't know, people may not be in touch with how much agriculture there really is an industry. I mean, from everything from the detergents to the solvents to palm oils. Oh my goodness, you're not going to find almost any personal care product out there without palm oil these days. But I mean, countless uses for these imported crops, and I've just been frightened that I don't think people are really aware of the agricultural lending component of USAID anymore. I mean, that was the original part of USAID. It was started out as a focused on development lending, and by which they meant loans to transform the world's food sector and the world's economy, put the U.S. on top to create more consumers for U.S. goods, to get people off the land and working in factories and producing for us and buying from us. And it really, to astounding effect. I mean, so when USAID was implemented, began somewhere close to 90% of humanity, at least over 80%, we're growing food every day. We're producing food every day. When I was looking for funding for my own research just 15 years ago, we're just at around the 50% mark in what's called the agrarian transition. In other words, people getting off the land and into other lines of work. So 50% of the world was producing food when I was looking for my research funds 15 years ago, and today we're down to 25%. So the system has become more precarious than ever in a lot of ways, yet the agricultural lending program has become sort of the least acknowledged and the most forgotten part of USAID. And I mean, I've tried reaching out to politicians who I've just been astounded that we seem to have lost sight of this, as that policymakers seem to have lost sight of this, that industry leaders seem to have lost sight of this. I mean, I don't know, with respect to industry, I don't know if it's so compartmentalized that folks are worried about certain things, losing funding in Africa, and others are worried about losing funding in Central America. I don't know. I'm honestly very concerned. Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions. One from
Please.
Mike and Ann.
Ann, did you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this is a workable idea, and Debbie, maybe you would have an opinion about it. But there is an app called Five Cause that
Sorry, say again.
politically active people. Are you familiar with Five Cause?
Five
calls.
Five Cause. And it's an app that politically active people have on their telephones. And it takes the current issues, and for each issue gives a background, a couple of paragraphs about why this matters and what it is. And then it gives you a script, and it links you to your representatives, your senators and your representative, so that if you could contact them and sell them on this as an important issue, impacting a lot of different things, they might put you on their agenda. And then anyone that it resonates with would call their representative or senators.
Excellent. This is an excellent idea, and I could direct people there as well. Is that
well, start with them and see if they will
sure, I'd have to
do it. But they
to
put all
first,
kinds of things, and they update it, and they would probably work with you to write a really good background piece about why this matters, why it matters to us, why it matters to the world, why it matters to food security, and then the script. And it's just a way to activate a lot of people to make phone calls.
It's a great idea.
That's a wonderful idea. Thank you.
That's great. I wonder if it would be a good idea, given that we're in Ohio, to reach out, in addition to elected representatives, people who are running against them. Because it seems like, say, where we are, Representative Balderson is adamant in his rejection of any kind of suggestion that might put him at odds with President Trump. However, he does have, I forget, people running against him who might be more willing to take up a cause like this because they're actually making a case that for an alternative or a better future.
And Jared Christian happens to be an Indivisible member. He's running against
Great.
Troy Balderson and might be very interested in that. Mike's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think Jared Christian would be one that you definitely, Jerrad, you probably have heard his name before.
Jarrad?
A-D, Jerrad as in David.
Okay.
Christian, okay. And the other thing, I've got Amelia Robinson's email in the chat, and I want to make sure I got this right. I put it down, Schortman.
Yes. At Gmail.
Okay.
Yes. I got in early, and there are only 50 some of us to begin with. So
I have a suggestion about how you might go about getting this information out that would grab people. And maybe Tom and Lori might have some ideas in the art ideas of getting the word out. But I was just thinking that these individual stories are very compelling. It could be on the national stage, it could be on an international stage. You follow one person who is going through all of the permutations that are happening with USAID and how that's affecting that person and that person's family and the larger community. And you sort of focus in on one individual and the impact it has. And it could be, it could take stories from all different places, some in the US and some in different countries. But I think it would engage people so that your facts that you present, which are excellent, have some context that people can relate to.
Yeah, good point.
That's an excellent idea.
Always got something, Mike.
I was just going to add to what you said. For 10 years, when we were doing our advocacy with Columbus Crossing Borders, and we're showing our documentary film and our art exhibit in places all over. I mean, it's colleges, schools, institutions, recreational centers, everything. The point you just made is really, really valid because you start knowing people by their name and not their sect. And it starts becoming personal because you recognize yourself within them. Art's got so much power. I would strongly suggest that, even if it's a temporary outreach to do something like that, make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Then Mike's
I don't know if Katie, I don't want to take your thunder here, Katie, but Katie Sweat put up, do you have a file or do you have a Substack account? They're
all right. I need to get back up with social media. So a little bit of background. I've been very sick for a long time, so I'm just recovering from a lengthy illness, and I'm trying to, do what I can to get this message out. But so Substack is one I've heard about. I know very little about it. I'm trying to figure out ways to represent myself without giving away my whole identity too.
Yeah, that might be something. I think that's a great idea, Katie. Get that and then write up your guest edit in there and then just submit it to the Columbus Dispatch.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. I hope you don't mind me taking that, borrowing that and saying that.
I want to point something out. I think this administration is very insensitive to USAID, but also meeting neighbors out here in Mansfield, farmers at harvest time. The government had destroyed markets. They didn't have anywhere to sell their soybeans.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So it's we're being attacked from all angles. It's not just USAID. It's like they're oblivious to how things work.
Right. And actually, USAID was a major buyer of U.S. crops for food aid as well. Mm-hmm. So destroyed our markets. That was just a ready
And
Mm.
China shutting that market down was huge. And then, drizzle out a little bit of sales there at the end of the season. But still, there's a lot of people. That's why it's down from 50% to 25% people
Yeah.
farming. People are losing their farms
Yeah.
left and right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, they were terrible for the farmers in the first administration too. I mean, record dairy closures and whatnot. I mean, it also drives me insane to listen to the rhetoric of this administration because we had free trade deals with Central America. I mean, the USDA was in parts of the USDA that they shut down were instrumental in advocating for U.S. crops to reach foreign markets and sort of working with organizations like USAID to have better access, fewer duties, less basically, yeah, pay less in duties and have importers pay less in duties and tariffs or absolutely nothing at all. In the case of Honduras, Central American Free Trade Agreement is like Central America's version of NAFTA or the North American Free Trade Agreement. So in my research area, for example, got to the point where even if you're just like have a little tiny homemade food business where you sell, French fries and a few things out of your home, it's more economical for you to buy imported U.S. French fries that come frozen in a bag than it is for you to buy local potatoes in Honduras and just fry them in cooking oil. And that's how great market access all of our crops really did have. And that was just, USAID obviously, again, is a big buyer of U.S. grain for food aid. And yeah, I mean, farmers are going to be missing inputs that are produced abroad. God, it's going to be I'm sorry, it's going to be a disaster. And the rhetoric about how, I mean, goodness gracious, I mean, these free trade agreements were crafted over time with an eye towards long-term strategy by teams of experts, and the idea that just even the smartest man in the world could do somewhat better just on his own, or the smartest woman in the world could do better on her own is just, it's absurd on its face. It's also absurd on its face to claim we're getting better trade agreements when basically CAFTA gave, at least for agricultural products and food products, gave the United States just absolute, duty-free access to Central American markets. And they're huge buyers of, say, Fans cornflakes, all kinds of processed foods made in the United States. I mean, that's what folks rely on. You have people eating hot dogs instead of beans because it's more economical to buy a hot dog imported from the United States than beans that are produced locally and actually cost more than they did in the United States same time period, for example. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just on all levels so confounding and concerning that people don't. I don't know. It's just, as you said, there's just it's like a fire hose of crap that's just always spewing at us. But I still find it disturbing that no one in at least in industry is up in arms about this. I would have thought they would be.
One of the things that has come home to me and all the time that my wife and I, Aeleka that was there, and our son worked in Honduras, and also just watching the current administration, is the failure to recognize that the United States, as well as everybody else in the world, is embedded in webs of dependency. And we structure our economy on the presumption that those dependencies will continue to function as they have, and that they will, frankly, USAID constructed those dependencies to benefit the United States. I mean, one of the things USAID has done in Honduras, for example, is to strongly encourage by the leverage they have with these block grants, these guaranteed loans, is to get farmers into producing not food to feed themselves, but products that are marketable on the world economy. So pineapples, for example, or watermelons. There was a farming group near the town of Naco, where we lived in Honduras, that went from farming corn and beans and squash, which is what people ate, to farming watermelon. Because they could sell watermelons, they could get loans to grow watermelon. Okay, that's fine, but you can't live on watermelons. And so when those dependencies fail, when the market price of watermelon goes down, you no longer have the money you need to buy the food now that you used to grow, but now you need the food you need to eat. And so it's a very fragile web. And any perturbation in that web, because natural causes or political causes, puts a lot of people at risk. The absolute ripping up of the web, which is what Musk and Trump have done.
The financial underpinning.
The financial underpinning of that web now opens up a whole, it's not just a hurricane here or an earthquake there that has disrupted production. Now you've disrupted the entire financial foundation of the webs on which US farmers depend, on which US consumers depend, farmers and consumers around the world depend. And other countries could pick up some of the slack, but you're trying to reconstruct a web that the creation of which began in 1961 and has been elaborated on ever since.
And there are like obvious sorts of things that are going to happen. Like, okay, so the block grants enabled lending institutions that receive them to create their own agricultural lending programs. They're going to withdraw those, as I think that's going to be one of the earliest choices they make, right? But there's also the fact that the recipients of these loans, the smaller to mid-sized export crop producers, in many ways, they have often, at least in my research area, and I've read enough ethnography and analyses of how food and farming works elsewhere, it suggests that this is similar, that the small to mid-sized producers who can't get any credit without these USAID loans, and they really rely on them. They're growing some export crops, but they don't have a lot of land. They are interested in taking in some rental income from someone who wants to, say, farm corn or beans. And they're happy to extend that season out long enough for someone to farm corn, beans, and tomatoes, for example. Whereas you have really big landlords and landowners in Honduras who are engaged in giant agribusiness sorts of farming. And if they're going to rent to a small scale producer, like the really poor people who don't have any land, who are still growing the crops that are eaten locally for themselves and a little bit for local markets. I mean, if a large landowner is going to rent to someone like that, they have their agenda and they want that land cleared and converted to cow pasture as soon as possible. So they're going to use the small farmer with no land they're going to have them pay a rental fee. So the small farmer pays to do this. If they don't have any land, then they only get the tiniest time possible. So it's one short bean season or just one corn season, and then you're done. And then that gets converted to cattle pasture, never to be used for corn and bean farming again. Whereas if you only have, say, 3 to 15 or 20 acres, you don't have that same incentive structure to be converting your land into cow pasture. You're more likely to grow a lot of these export crops, so things that don't lend themselves to having a big harvesting machine or a big planting machine, stuff like, everything from green beans and tomatoes to broccoli and avocados to citrus fruit, pineapple, honeydew melon, that sort of crop. Does that sort of make sense?
So the loans enable the medium-sized farmers to rent out or land to small farmers for longer periods of time to grow things so they can be part of the economy too.
Yeah, so each one of those loans is probably supporting, depending on the size of the land holdings, like 3 to 8 other smaller farmers who don't have land. And that's what I'm looking at in my research area. And the incentive structure is similar in many impoverished places across the world. So I would be shocked to find that that's not the case elsewhere, if that kind of clarifies.
Yeah.
Karen's got her hand up.
Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts and a bad voice still. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is, the impending crisis that Edward talks about and that Aeleka has laid out. That's one thing that we're going to have to confront, more chaos during which more advantages can be taken by people creating the chaos. At the same time, I'm looking at some of these things, we're importing and exporting processed foods and more processed foods and this product and that product. Somehow, over the years of our working, we've managed to create a system which creates more dependency in some people and just borderline existence that they'll never be able to move out of. So planning ahead for the future when we take control again, somehow it seems to be that the people who know what's going on, like Aeleka, need to be able to convey that to the rest of us. So I guess one point, are you in touch with former USAID employees who got fired? Practically all
That's
of
an
them.
excellent idea. I
Must
struggle
be some
because they
economists
pulled
in
down
there.
the websites, but if you have anyone you could put me in touch with who could then pass me on to others through the grapevine, I'd be very grateful.
I don't know offhand, but I'll keep it in mind. I'm thinking about Sherrod Brown running for senator in Ohio. The last time he ran and lost, there was a pile of money thrown at him. But the other problem was that the state party basically went for the low-hanging fruit in the urban areas. This time, the new state chair is reaching out into the rural hinterlands. Sherrod needs to know this, at least in some headline terms, because
I would love to get the message.
the first book was The Myths of Free Trade, talking about NAFTA and CAFTA and the harms that it would cause. So I think there might be some ways that he could work it in. I'm thinking also about More Perfect Union. If you're aware of the website, the organization, one of the local boys, John Russell, was in near East Palestine, moved down to Parkersburg, but he's been going around and he's also done some stuff from abroad, from Italy, that had agricultural connection. This is the kind of thing that More Perfect Union classroom would be very interested in for a 15 or 20 minute.
I'm actually not familiar with them, so that's my ignorance there.
I think Deb's probably got a link I've sent her, but if not, I'll send one and she can get it. Or I got your email; it's in the chat. I think that's all for now, except to say, I'm very concerned about AI and where it's going, and I'm having a real fight with myself to stave off the paranoia, thinking that AI has already taken over and they don't care about human survival. but that's just
they don't. They don't, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's concerning how the algorithm is altered by the AI. Yeah, what you find online is altered by them too. Well, the bots or AI, I guess, whatever.
Along the same
Go ahead. I didn't mean to speak over you. Go ahead.
Along the same lines as Karen's talking about, where you get in touch with some people that are working on the rural issues. We had somebody, Scott Klebe from the Poster Project, and he is out in Nebraska, I think. His wife is the leader of the Democratic Party out there, and he's got these great sections that he's got organized by state, and he goes all these different issues that are applicable to people in that state, and then he's got people that do graphics for them. So we can get you the information to get in touch with him.
Wonderful.
You might want
Thank
to
you.
do a segment on this for what he's got, and then he could plug you into how it applies to all the different states. I know that it's a kind of a small operation that he has going, but it's pretty extensive, that thing that he's built. So it's you can find it the Poster Project, but I will send you the information about it.
Thank you.
The other thing I was wondering about is whether this might be turning out to be an opportunity to get us away from some of the heavily processed foods that Karen's mentioning. Some of the products that we have become dependent on that maybe aren't really good for us anyway, that are part of this chain that we've become addicted to, sort of, that maybe we're moving, whether we like it or not, into a different kind of model, financially and agriculturally, that we're not prepared for. But I'm wondering if there are people that are working on alternative models that haven't been tried before, or at least not since the 60s, because we've been doing a consumer kind of orientation, like whatever sells and whatever's going to help the bottom line is good, just automatically. But we know we've been killing ourselves in many different ways by focusing on the bottom line. So, while it's economically feasible to have a product for the least possible cost that can feed the most people, what exactly are we feeding them? And what does that involve in terms of healthcare down the road, all the different illnesses, just there are a lot of things that the model that we've been using probably has harmed us in certain ways. So I'm just wondering if you know of people that are working on an alternative model that we haven't done since the 60s, before the 60s.
it's a great idea. I mean, I am not specifically, I do know, look, okay, I struggle with this because yeah, I like to think that there's an opportunity there, but I tend to think what's going to happen is there's going to be just a bunch of snatching up of land and a bunch of opportunists and people who profit, you know, whether people are dying or whether they're happy, that will just swoop into profit from this. I mean, I'd like to think on the most positive note, yes, it might be an opportunity to move away from processed food, but I mean, I think the irony of this is that USAID has made agricultural loans so indispensable. I'm not sure how to even like get people to keep their lands through a transition into that kind of farming. I mean, I know based on my own research, there's an appetite for growing locally valued foods, but and an appetite. I mean, Hondurans love entrepreneurship. I mean, I hate to stereotype, but I mean, there's a real cultural value towards that of valuing any kind of entrepreneurship. And farming fits right into that. Being independent, having your own business, making something yourself in that way. It just, yeah, I mean, how do we get people to hold on to their farms through a transition into something like that? I mean,
there could be a way of financing or encouraging some of these businesses. It's sort of like what's happening with the solar industry. You know, that you've got a lot of pushback and a lot of people who just are straight up fossil fuels and nothing else. But the public demand for using solar is increased. So maybe that the public demand for better foods, better quality food is obvious. I mean, people are willing to pay more for organic stuff, but there's maybe not been an economic model to support these people these farmers who are actually growing organic foods in all these different places. And maybe it's a matter of, what investors are willing to take a chance. Um, are there banks that could be approached that are smaller banks? We're not going to be working with the Chases or the big banks, but maybe some smaller banks that are willing to work on some of these things that, the public really does want.
and someone mentioned to me, this is the only the other thing I can think of along these lines. Someone did mention to me something the other day about a worker co-op model where people sort of pool their resources to have small businesses that are owned then sort of as a group, like everyone gets a profit share. I don't know. I mean, I just think there are big hurdles in changing the way people conceptualize things. The deference definitely that we give to wealthy people. And I mean, as an economic anthropologist, we think of the economy as, okay, the economy is about providing resources to people. So it should be about getting housing to people. It should be about getting, food and water and all the necessary healthcare, all the necessary resources of life to people. But instead, we as a society, I guess, have just accepted or even cheered on this consolidation of resources as sort of the goal of the economy, rather than seeing it in its human sense, which is it's supposed to, I mean, the economy is defined as a system that gets resources to people, distribution of resources, and yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the best definition from a historical or an archaeological perspective.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it also, what I'm hearing in the discussion is how do you change the incentive structure in such a way that farmers who want to grow food that people, organic food for organically grown crops or raise animals organically, how do you get people to move away from processed foods? Well, part of it's an expense question, but it also seems like how do you structure? I mean, that's what USAID was. It was a structuring of incentive. So we will guarantee loans if you grow these sorts of things in this way to these standards, and then sell them to us. So we give you the incentive. We don't tell you what to grow, but we basically make it very attractive for you to grow some crops and not others. Attractive to use some inputs and not others. And so to restructure all this, I think USAID could function very positively in the future by shifting the incentive structure such that we will guarantee loans if you grow crops that are locally consumed.
Interestingly enough, what I could find about what's happening under Biden, before USAID was shut down, is that some of these lending programs were actually being used to unwind the monocropping that has been so damaging that USAID itself actually promoted. But so I think, yeah, the irony of it is, I think in some ways we need something like USAID to unwind the situation that USAID has put us in, with made itself indispensable, but also just to unwind the damage that USAID itself has caused in a lot of ways.
I think Lori's got a question.
Well, it was mentioned several times about models for approaching farming with a different perspective. We know a number of people who are doing that. In fact, we know quite a large outreach in Nashville that was partially supported by Vanderbilt University, that has really done tremendous work and along those lines of organizing farming to fight back against the dangers of factory farming. There's a writer, Jonathan Safran Foer, who wrote a book. It was addressing veganism, but it really, what it came down to was talking about the corporate monster that factory farming is, and how you can't even survive anymore as a farmer unless you've got a good amount of luck and incentive to stay away from the factory farms. And the dangers of that exist on so many levels. Our water supply, it's huge. And so as you're talking about these things, I'm thinking this could be a completely new meeting. And I know a number of people, even locally, who have gotten involved with this. I mean, sometimes it feels like you're chipping away at a brick wall with a toothpick, but giant communities are being affected. I've seen what's going on in Nashville. It's remarkable. So yeah.
I would love to, any context you could pass along, that would be fantastic.
And I have to ask a question to Edward. This is a little off topic, but regarding your work, I have a very good friend whose father, Trevor Arscott, was involved with Honduras. Did you work with him?
No, I did not. We worked up in the north. Pat and I worked up in the northwest corner of Honduras, so about 35 kilometers southwest of San Pedro Sula, and then we worked in 4 different valleys. We were archaeologists, and we ran a field school there for about 25 years, and so we were looking at the prehistoric trajectories, the histories of these different valleys, to what extent they converged or diverged, and what that did was gave us, in part, a viewpoint, a perspective on changes in the economies of the country, and the effects those changes had, very adverse effects they had on local people who depended on farming. Because when we started in 1977, the vast majority of Hondurans were farmers. Most of them were subsistence farmers. No, a great many people were poor, but nobody was starving.
It was a very safe country.
It was a very safe country. And by the time you get to the 1990s, early 2000s, many fewer people were farming. Most of the land had been taken up by large agribusinesses, and people were poorer than they were in the 70s, and now they were suffering from malnutrition. And that was a shift that was very obvious, even to a couple of archaeologists, and it was sort of typified what was going on around the world. Can't blame USAID for all of that by any means. It was a model of free trade in which Honduras was systematically stripped of resources and suffered from an imbalance of trade that put it in a very disadvantageous position in the world market. So the answer to your question is no.
He was a soil expert, and so I thought you might have. He threw Ohio State.
He was affiliated with a large fruit company there.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's 95 now, so
yeah.
He was doing this work back then probably in the 50s and 60s.
That's probably North Coast was a fruit company.
Yeah, it's United Fruit Company. Had big plantations on the North Coast.
Yeah, I think that's who he was affiliated with.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got about 15 more minutes. Is anybody else have any questions, or otherwise I'll just let Aeleka go ahead and do the next segment.
Oh, I mean, I think we've kind of gone through a number of them, but basically one of my thoughts on structuring this was to focus a great deal on the United States and then to hit the whole world food supply as maybe one of my later explainer videos, or if any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Just because I've been told that, yeah, really reaching the US audience is going to require focusing on how USAID helps us at home. So I kind of divided that into 3 sections, including, okay, first of all, these were 50% loan guarantees. We're spending basically nothing, even on paper, but the critical for US food security, critical for American industry, critical for US economy altogether. Basically, then the next section focuses on 4 ways that the block grants funnel money back into the United States, be it the direct repayment of 98% of all loan funds, the spending on US-made farm inputs, which is essentially obligatory to get a loan, to get a USAID-backed loan, and also a lot of these institutions that have extended credit, made their own agricultural credit programs. They have modeled theirs after USAID, so they're still using the same loan schedules to determine who's a good risk for credit and who's not. And then it also funnels back into money into the U.S. economy by having people who are their ready markets for our own goods. They buy from us. They buy food from us because they don't produce it for themselves anymore, as we've discussed. And we have, by being seen to provide charitable aid, even though these are very self-serving loan packages, we are able to leverage, market access that benefits us, as preferential economic relationships. If a country is going to build a port, we get first dibs on investing in that port, having a controlling share of the port, things of that nature, right? And then, I focus on how USAID is really, it's been seen as in the public eye as really being about soft power, but I would argue that the ability to control, simply by providing these loans and providing the information about who should receive them, you are able to control, frankly, kind of puppeteering the whole economy in a lot of respects. You decide, what varieties of crops are produced, who's going to buy them, what inputs are going to be used, what seeds are going to be used to produce them. You're fiddling around in there and sort of determining what size farmers can survive in different sorts of markets, whether it be producing honeydew or producing palm oil. There are different criteria to survive in each, but it really is a tremendous power. And USAID was designed to put the U.S. on top after the post-World War II period, when everyone, a lot of the globe was struggling. We're just like, well, we're not bombed out, and we're going to take the long strategy here to sell this as development, but really have it rework the whole world's economy to create markets for U.S. products where they didn't exist before, to get peasants off the land and have them participating in the market, both as factory workers, as buyers of our goods, and also, of course, as export crop producers as well, right? And then, yeah, the next segment after that, it just goes into explaining how it is important for the whole world's food supply. And I think I've gone over these points, but the expanded agricultural food lending programs the banks themselves have, and then the spillover effect of the fact that the people who receive these USAID-backed loans, who have no other option really for credit, they are themselves typically renting out to many poor farmers who don't have any land at all. So there's going to be a ripple effect downwards and laterally, I would say, and downwards. One could think of it that way, when the block grants expire and if we don't have anything to replace them. And then, yeah, and I have a very silly thing here. It says, to have U.S. world dominance, there must be no more homemade pants, which is just the basic point of USAID initially was to make sure there's no more homemade anything, was kind of the point, right? So you can't save your seeds now. You got to buy. The thing about hybrid seeds, if you save them, let's say you're taking, got a hybrid grain crop, for example, you're going to get about 25% of that crop is going to look just like its parent crop. 25% is going to be real crappy and just not look up to snuff at all. And then everything else is going to be somewhere in the middle. So these hybrid seeds aren't meant for saving. And now we have Monsanto, of course, suing people for getting their genetic material tangled up in their crops. Another matter. But USAID was really designed to make sure, I mean, we're all, like, the whole world was market participants, and the US was the leader in world global affairs, and really was pulling the strings behind the scenes, but, well, portraying it to the world as if it were really generous aid packages, if that makes sense.
I mean, part of the premise of USAID beginning in the 60s and the lending program, which was supposed to create mutual dependencies, was supposed to generate world peace. Because it was supposed to be, the argument was, if we were all dependent on each other, we would certainly never go to war with each other, because it would disrupt world trade, and nobody would be stupid enough to disrupt that trade on which we all had come to depend. Its downside, of course, was that the dependencies were never equal. The United States benefited far more than, say, Honduras did, who sold cheap raw materials to the United States and bought finished expensive goods back from our country. But the idea was we were going to bind the world in mutual dependencies that would guarantee world peace well into the future. Of course, that didn't work out.
But they said, there used to be a quote, I forget who said it originally, but the word, oh, two nations with a McDonald's have never gone to war. I mean, well, yeah, Russia and Ukraine now. But yeah, I mean, it seemed in some ways very silly, but and
it was idealistic.
I mean, but in another way, possibly just a way to sell again some trade practices that really benefit. And not, I mean, it's also more complicated than simply the U.S. over Honduras. So wealthy Hondurans benefited more than poor Hondurans. Obviously, U.S. corporations benefit more than the average U.S. consumer, but wealthy consumers benefit more than poorer consumers. And we have people who live in food deserts in this country, and then we have a seasonless grocery store for that still, at least here, available to a wide swath of the population, middle class, depending on geography. But I think if we, allow these block grants to expire, it's going to be something, seasonless produce, even like meat and cheese and dairy products of all kinds are going to be luxuries for the ultra rich, at least during a transition period that's going to be phenomenally hard on the population. And even when you don't see outright starvation, when you have people who are undernourished, malnourished in that way, that's come about from a host of other causes, right, that aren't ever recorded in the books as being malnutrition. Yeah, I think that I've covered it unless more questions. I mean, I really appreciate your time and all your suggestions, and I really do.
I just have one more thought, and it just, and I don't know how realistic this is, but it seems that we are already, whether we like it or not, we have crashed our system. And we probably won't get it back as it was in the 60s, say, when USAID was going, getting established. And, I think you could make a case back then that this, yes, was a good way to ensure world peace with disciplinaries or interdependent stuff. But what we've seen over the years is a lot of countries have come to seriously resent the U.S. And this isn't just new. This is just since Trump. And there's good reason for that. And, if we have kept playing the dominance game, but I think we've gone past that just in this administration because everything's been, shut down. Our allies are turning away from us with good reason. And what I'm thinking is that the old model can't really be reconstructed in any way that's going to make sense without starting from scratch and involving all the different countries in the world so that U.S. is not put themselves on top. I mean, we're there whether we like it or not. We're kind of
and I mean, I think there are good arguments to be made that shaking the world of our influence is best in the long run. But again, trying to rug pull the financing for the whole world food system it just boggles the mind that this is even being contemplated or that it's happened and it's not, and people haven't even realized. I guess it's like our own branding tricked Elon Musk and Trump into thinking that this really was a charitable aid organization. When I mean, obviously it wasn't in many respects. I mean, the food aid, the medical care, all of that, but the agricultural lending program was always at heart about real hard power, not just the soft power that we hear about in the news when USAID comes up.
Well, and I think we don't maybe give credit to what other countries are expressing and have been for a long, long time.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
That's
and
Sure.
maybe our salvation is going to be, beginning to listen to them because we have no choice. Like, I don't know how many of you heard Carney's speech from Canada, or saw
Right.
it,
It's a rupture.
but
Yeah.
sort of gives you an idea of another way of looking at the whole world, not only economically but politically and in so many ways. And since we're at an inflection point, it seems that if there were some incentives for some maybe banks and other corporations that were not the biggies, that aren't getting the big huge tax breaks, but could break out with different kinds of incentives and be involved with other countries, maybe we'd have a chance of creating something new. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know
I
nothing.
have a lot of ideas about U.S. domestic policy and ways to encourage people to move away from mechanization and tax incentives for that. I mean, it sounds strange given my field of study, but I've given less thought, I think, to trying to invent a new way of thinking about the international sphere. I mean, it's just so hard. I don't know. I mean, I definitely want to think that that's possible. I just struggle with the idea that the transition, when we've down to just 25% of the world producing the world's food. I mean, a transition through any financial hard or shake up in the financial markets that get loan money into the hands of those farmers. I don't know. It could go in the direction of people, saying, "Oh, well, we live on this land, we're going to claim it," or it could go in the direction of just losing everything and just even further loss of farmers, smaller farmers losing what little they had left. I don't know. I struggle with it. It can go on one hand, maybe we can spin this into something better, but on the other hand, I just think that I don't know. I'm just really worried about the devastation that.
Yeah, it seems like it would be rough any which way you slice it. It'll be a tough and maybe not a very smooth transition. But
yeah, we'd have to have programs to guide people, and we're planning so poorly right now. So sorry. Yeah. It's interesting thought. Any thoughts that you would have to guide me in that thought process, I'd be really, I appreciate it here. I appreciate hearing them. I mean, sorry.
Thank you so much for your insights and all the information. I'm hoping we've been able to be of some help and give some feedback. Anybody else have one more comment for Aeleka before we adjourn? Because it is now 1:26.
I have to turn the classroom back over here too.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? I don't want to miss anybody.
Just thank you. Thank you for this information.
Thank
you for listening, and thank you for your input. I'm very grateful for this opportunity and for everyone's comments. And I do have just one logistical question. Once I close this, will I still be able to see the group comments, like for the emails and stuff, or do I need to just screenshot that now before I drop out of the conversation?
Yeah, that's great. You do that. And Mike is also going to save the chat for me. And
okay, so I can get that.
I'll be able to put highlights in the little blurb that I put out for this next week. I don't know how soon the video will come. It sort of depends on whether John and Mishka are still in New Zealand or whether they've come home or whether they can do it on the fly. I don't know, but we'll get it as soon as we can.
No pressure on that. I took notes as well, but it's always nice to have the actual record of the comments. But just real quick, so I will be able to get the information in the chat later without screen capturing it now. Is that correct?
Well, I will be sending you the chat specifically.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a complete idiot with Zoom. Forgive me. I know
It's fine. I'll send you the chat after. I asked Mike to do it because I have trouble saving it myself. So
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you all so much.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
And then I'll put highlights in the little blurb that I send out probably tomorrow evening. So that's when you should get it. I hope you guys all got the email that I sent out yesterday about there are some events tomorrow. If you haven't seen it, go look for it because there are a bunch of events happening tomorrow on Friday. I can't remember all the,
I'll take a look at
at
it.
least
Thank
two of
you.
them. So check them out. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Everybody. And
And again,
thanks.
thank you for this opportunity. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for listening and all your awesome feedback. I really, really very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your coming too. Take care. All right.
Take care.
I will hold on for a minute till we end the video. Thanks
All right.
again, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
I got to chat.